Hey guys, today we have an impressive story of survival and revelation that will move you. Let's learn about the story of Elowen Callahan, a woman who faced an abusive marriage, went through near-death experiences, and had a powerful vision about the future of humanity. Before we start, write in the comments where you are watching and take the opportunity to subscribe to the channel. Get ready, because this story promises to transform the way we see what's to come. My name is Elowen Callahan, and I never thought I would be here telling this story. I'm not a writer nor a speaker, just an ordinary woman who went through something extraordinary, something that completely changed my way of seeing life and death. I decided to share my experience because I feel that other people need to know that there is something beyond this reality as we know it. It all started during a difficult period in my life. I had just divorced James Dutt, my ex-husband, after years in an abusive relationship that consumed me inside. I had moved into a small apartment in Portland, trying to rebuild my life from scratch. It was a simple place, in need of renovations, but it was my little corner of peace after living in a toxic environment for so long. I was focused on making that apartment feel like a home, especially for when my children came to visit me. Dylan, my oldest, was about to leave for college, and I wanted him to have a welcoming place to come home to whenever he wanted. Even though I had little money, I started doing small repairs myself. I painted the walls, sanded the floor, replaced some basic installations. It was hard work, and especially for someone with a bad back like me. I had already had surgery a few years earlier, and the doctors prescribed me painkillers to control the chronic pain. I tried more natural alternatives. I did yoga when I could. I sought out alternative treatments. I stuck to my faith, but it wasn't always enough, especially on days when the physical work was more intense. One night in particular, I'll never forget it, I was exhausted after spending hours painting the hallway. The strong smell of cheap paint was still in the air, mixed with the odor of the paint remover I had used to clean up some spills. My back hurt so much I could barely move. I took some painkillers, now I know it was more than I should have, and lay down on the old sofa in the living room, waiting for the pain to go away. I didn't realize when I fell asleep, but I remember exactly the moment I started to feel something strange. It was as if my entire body was tingling, a sensation that started at my fingertips and spread, going up my arms, legs, until it took over everything. I tried to move, but I was completely paralyzed. That's when fear started to take over me. I wanted to scream, to ask for help, but no sound came out of my mouth. Suddenly, I felt an inexplicable lightness. It was as if I were floating, detached from my own body. That's when I saw myself, yes, I literally saw myself lying on that old couch. I was up there, looking down at myself. It was the most surreal feeling I have ever experienced in my life. There was no fear at that moment, just an enormous curiosity and a peace that made no sense in the face of such an extraordinary situation. This was just the first part of my experience, the beginning of a journey that would change my life forever. What happened next was even more intense and significant, but I'll tell you about that in the sequel to this story. As I floated above my body, I began to notice that the apartment around me was getting darker and darker. It wasn't like when we turned off a light. It was gradual, as if a dark fog was filling the entire space. The freshly painted walls, the old furniture, everything began to disappear into the darkness. And then, in the blink of an eye, the apartment was completely gone. I found myself immersed in an absolute void. It wasn't like the darkness of the room at night, when you can still see some outlines or when our eyes get used to the lack of light. It was a dense, almost palpable darkness. The strangest thing is that I could see myself perfectly in this darkness, as if my body, or whatever I was at that moment, was emitting a light of its own. It was then that I realized I wasn't alone. I began to feel presences around me, movements in the darkness. At first they were just shadows, figures that passed quickly, but little by little they began to take shape. They were tall figures, very tall, with skin that looked grey and dull. What impressed me most and scared me were his eyes. Or rather, their absence. Where the eyes should have been, there were only empty cavities. No light, no life. These creatures didn't move like we do. It was as if they were gliding through the darkness, and they seemed more and more interested in me. They started to get closer, surrounding me. I couldn't hear any sounds coming from them, but I could feel their intentions. It was as if they wanted something from me, something vital, essential. I felt a deep, primal fear, unlike anything I had ever experienced before. I tried to scream, but there was no sound. I tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. The darkness was endless in all directions, The creatures were getting closer and closer, and I could feel an intense cold emanating from them. It was a cold that went beyond the physical, that seemed to freeze my very essence. Just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, when despair was about to completely consume me, something extraordinary happened. At first, it was just a warm feeling, soft like a ray of sunshine on a winter morning. Then a light began to emerge. I can't explain where it was coming from. It seemed to come from every direction and nowhere at the same time. As the light grew stronger, the creatures began to retreat. It was as if the light hurt them in some way. They shrank, twitched, and little by little they disappeared into the darkness. The cold they emanated was replaced by a welcoming, comforting warmth. The light continued to increase in intensity until the darkness completely disappeared. It was a light unlike anything I had ever seen. It didn't hurt the eyes. It didn't dazzle. It was like she was made of pure love, if that makes any sense. And it was in this light that I had my first true encounter with the other side. Surrounded by that extraordinary light, I found myself being transported to a place that human words cannot completely describe. It was as if you were in an environment that existed and didn't exist at the same time. The colors there were different, more vivid, some that I don't even know how to name. The air, if I can call it that, felt alive, pulsing with an energy that I could feel in every part of my being. It was then that I saw him, a being that emanated its own light, more intense than everything around it, wearing something that looked like a white cloak. But it was no ordinary white. It was as if the light itself was woven into a garment. His face, it's hard to describe. It was at once definite and undefined, as if subtly changing from moment to moment, but always maintaining an expression of deep love and understanding. There were no introductions. They were not necessary. It was as if I had known him forever, as if he was part of me in some way. Communication between us didn't happen with words. It was more like a direct exchange of thoughts and feelings. Each word he shared with me was loaded with multiple meanings, emotions and deep understandings. He showed me that he was in a place that we, in our limited earthly understanding, call heaven. But it wasn't the heaven of religious book illustrations with clouds and angels playing harps. It was a different state of existence, where everything was connected in a web of love and mutual understanding. There, for the first time in my life, or death, I felt completely accepted and understood. The being of light began to show me aspects of my life, not as a movie that played before my eyes, but as experiences that we could relive together. I saw moments of my childhood, my marriage to James, the birth of my children, the moments of pain and joy. But the most impressive thing is that there was no judgment, just understanding and unconditional love. In one specific moment, he showed me how every challenge I faced had a greater purpose. The difficulties in the marriage, the struggle to start over, even the physical pain that led to that experience. It was all part of a bigger plan, a path of learning and growth. It was not a fixed destination, but a set of possibilities that I had chosen to explore. Time that did not flow as we know it. I could have stayed seconds or centuries in that loving presence. It was impossible to say. The sensation was of being immersed in an eternal present, where past and future existed simultaneously. The peace he felt was so profound that it made any earthly happiness seem a pale shadow in comparison. It was in this state of absolute grace that the being of light began to reveal something more to me, something that went beyond my own personal experience. He had an important message to share with me, a truth that would change my understanding of our reality definitively. The being of light began to show me something that went far beyond my own existence. It was as if a curtain was being pulled back, revealing a reality that had always been there, but that we had never been able to see. He showed me that our reality, what we consider so solid and definitive, is actually just a small part of something much larger. I saw how our society, our power structures, our way of seeing the world, all of this was built as layers and layers of illusion. It wasn't a political or social revelation. It was something much deeper, something that touched the very nature of our existence. It was as if we lived in a kind of collective dream, a programmed reality from which few managed to awaken. The being showed me that there are forces, I'm not sure how to describe them, that work behind the scenes of our reality. They are not exactly good or bad beings, but entities that have assumed a controlling role over our human experience. I saw how they influence our thoughts, our beliefs, even our choices, in ways we couldn't even imagine. It was then that I received the most impactful revelation. On November 13th, 2024, a fundamental truth will be revealed to humanity. The being showed me this moment with impressive clarity. On that specific day, something will happen that will begin an irreversible process of collective awakening. It's as if a key was turned, opening the doors of a prison we didn't even know existed. I saw people around the world begin to awaken simultaneously, as if a blindfold was removed from their eyes. The power structures that maintain this illusory reality will begin to dismantle. It will not be a violent or chaotic process, but a profound transformation in collective consciousness. It is as if all of humanity is about to wake up from a long dream. The being explained to me that these forces that control our reality already know that their time is coming to an end. It's as if we are living the last moments of a very long cycle. I saw how they try to maintain their control, but it's like trying to hold water in your hands. It always finds a way out. The date of November 13th, 2024 marks the beginning of the end of this control. The most fascinating thing is that all of these were shown to me not just as concepts or ideas, but as direct experiences. It was as if I could feel, see, and understand everything simultaneously. Each revelation was accompanied by a deep understanding that went beyond words, beyond rational thought. I saw how each human being has a role in this awakening, even if they don't know it yet. Throughout this process, the light being's love and compassion remained constant, helping me process each revelation without fear or anxiety. It was as if he was preparing me for something, giving me tools to understand and accept what was coming. It showed me that this awakening is not something to be feared, but celebrated. It is the moment humanity has been waiting for, without even knowing it. I remember feeling immense gratitude for receiving these revelations, but also an enormous weight for the responsibility they brought. I knew that if I returned, I would have to carry this knowledge with me. It was not a mission to convert people or create movements, but to be present and aware when the moment arrived, to be a witness to the awakening that was to come. The date of November 13th, 2024 was engraved in my mind as a milestone, a moment of transformation that will affect all of humanity. It is not an end, but a beginning, the beginning of a new era of consciousness and truth. The being of light showed me that each of us has the freedom to choose how to participate in this awakening, but that it will happen regardless of our individual will. After all those revelations, a moment came that would change everything, the time to choose. The being of light presented me with a decision that I never imagined I would have to make. I could stay there, in that place of infinite peace, or return to the physical world. The choice was completely mine. No pressure, no judgment. The temptation to stay was enormous. How do you describe the feeling of being in a place where all suffering disappears, where you are completely understood and loved? It was as if all the weights I had carried throughout my life, the abusive marriage, the physical pain, the daily worries had simply evaporated. There was no pain there, there was no fear, there was no feeling of loneliness that accompanied me so much. But then, as if carried by a gentle breeze, images of my children began to emerge. I saw Dylan, about to start his university life, still needing his mother's support so much, even if he didn't admit it. I saw my other children, their laughter, their hugs, even our arguments. Each memory brought with it a love so deep it almost hurt. The being of light didn't say anything, but I could feel his loving presence supporting me in that moment of decision. It was as if he perfectly understood the weight of that choice, the internal battle between heavenly peace and earthly love. There was no rush. There was no right or wrong. There was just the present moment and my decision. I started thinking about everything I had learned there, about the revelations, about the awakening that was to come. I felt like I had a responsibility, not just to my family, but to something bigger. How could I keep everything I had discovered to myself? How could I choose my individual peace when I knew I could make some difference, no matter how small, at this important moment for humanity? That was when I realized that my mission was not yet complete. Yes, I had found that place of infinite peace. I had experienced an unconditional love that transcended anything I had ever known, but my work in the physical world was not finished. There was still so much to do, so much to experience, so much to share. The decision to return was not an easy one. How could it be? It was like voluntarily choosing to leave paradise, but there was a certainty within me, a deep understanding that it was the right thing to do. The being of light emanated what I can only describe as a smile, not a physical smile, but a wave of approval and love that completely enveloped me. Before leaving, I received one last message, that I would never truly be alone, that connection I established there would remain forever, even if I couldn't always feel it consciously. It was a reminder that, even returning to the physical world with all its difficulties, I would take with me a portion of that peace, that unconditional love. As soon as I made my decision, I began to feel a force pulling me back. It was time to return, to face the challenges of the physical world again, but this time with a new perspective, with a new purpose. Returning to the physical body was as intense an experience as leaving. It was like being sucked back through an invisible tunnel, but this time the speed was much greater. That feeling of peace began to gradually dissipate, giving way to a heaviness I had forgotten existed, the heaviness of being in a physical body. The first thing I smelled was the strong smell of paint still present in the apartment. Then came the pain. My whole body hurt, especially my back. I tried to move, but my limbs felt like they were made of lead. My mouth was dry, and it had a strange, metallic taste. I opened my eyes with difficulty, and the weak light coming through the window seemed too bright. I knew I needed help. With a lot of effort, I managed to get up from the couch. The world was spinning around me, and I could barely keep my balance. I staggered to the apartment door, bracing myself against the freshly painted walls. I left handprints in the fresh paint, but at that moment, it didn't matter. I needed to get to the stairs. I needed to find someone. I don't know exactly how I managed to open the door. I remember taking a few steps down the hallway before my legs gave out. I fell right there at the top of the stairs. The last thing I heard were footsteps approaching quickly, and a voice that I recognized as that of Mr. Thompson, my downstairs neighbor. I woke up in the hospital to the rhythmic sound of heart monitors and the characteristic smell of a hospital environment. A nurse was adjusting something on the IV dripping into my arm. When he realized I was awake, he called the doctor. They explained to me that I had accidentally overdosed on painkillers, made worse by inhaling paint fumes. If Mr. Thompson hadn't found me in time, I found out that he had heard a strange noise and, when he went out to check, he found me unconscious. He called the ambulance immediately and stayed with me until it arrived. I will never forget what he did for me. It's funny how sometimes the angels God puts in our lives don't have wings or light of their own. Sometimes they're just concerned neighbors who decide to check out a strange noise in the middle of the night. The doctors wanted to know if I had tried to kill myself. I explained several times that no, that it was an accident, that I had just taken too many painkillers for the back pain. I talked about renovating the apartment, about the hard work, about being tired. They listened attentively, but I could tell they still had their doubts. I didn't tell them about my experience. How do you explain something like this to people who are trained to deal only with the physical, with the measurable? How do I make them understand that even though my body was dying, I had never felt more alive? I kept all of this to myself at that moment, knowing that I would need to find the right moment to share what I had experienced. I was hospitalized for a few days for observation. It felt strange to be back in the normal world after having experienced something so extraordinary. Everything seemed different now, the colors less vivid, the sounds harsher, as if I were wearing a heavy suit that limited my sensations. A few months after my first experience, something unexpected happened. I was trying to rebuild my life, following medical recommendations and pursuing new interests. A group of friends invited me on a rafting trip. At the time, I thought it would be a good idea, something to help me reconnect with life, with adventure, with nature. The day was perfect for rafting. Blue sky, pleasant temperature, river with a good volume of water. Our guide gave us all the safety instructions, and I felt confident with my life jacket and helmet. The first rapids were exhilarating, making me feel more alive than I had in a long time. Then we reached a more challenging part of the river. The boat made a sudden maneuver to avoid a rock, and I simply couldn't hold on. One moment I was in the boat, the next I was being dragged by the current. The water was freezing, and the force of the river was much greater than I imagined. I tried to swim as the guide had instructed, on my back, with my feet forward, but the current was too strong. Every time I tried to surface for air, another wave pulled me under. I could hear distant screams from my friends. I could see the boat trying to get closer, but everything seemed to happen in slow motion. At one point, I hit a submerged rock hard. The impact knocked all the air out of my lungs. I tried to fight. I tried to swim, but my movements became slower and slower. The icy water penetrated every part of my body. I started to feel that same sensation as the first experience, a tingling, a lightness. But this time, it was different. There was no darkness. There were no dark creatures. Instead, I found myself surrounded by a light that came from the water itself. It was as if every drop of the river shone with its own light. The surrounding mountains seemed to pulse with life, and the sky. Oh, the sky was bluer than any blue I've ever seen. I felt connected to everything around me. I could feel the ancient strength of the mountains, the vital energy of the water, the dance of the wind between the trees. It wasn't just me anymore. It was like I had become part of something much bigger, like every atom of my being was in harmony with the nature around me. It was then that I felt that presence again. It wasn't exactly the same being of light as the first time, but something equally powerful and loving. It was as if nature itself was communicating with me, showing me profound truths about the connection between all things. There was no fear. Even though I knew my physical body was in danger, I felt a deep peace. It was as if time had stopped, as if that moment of communion with nature was eternal. I saw beauty in every drop of water, in every stone, in every leaf of the trees that passed by me. Everything was alive, everything was connected, everything was part of a perfect cosmic dance. During this second experience, I was transported to a place I can only describe as a heavenly garden. But it was no ordinary garden. Every plant, every flower seemed to emit its own light, pulse with its own consciousness. The colors were impossible to describe with our limited vocabulary. It was as if new colors had been invented especially for this place. It was there that I had my most profound encounter, not just with a being of light, but with a presence that I can only describe as divine. It was as if love itself had taken shape, but not a physical form as we know it. It was a presence that permeated everything, that was in every particle of that garden, and at the same time was the garden itself. Every plant in that place seemed to tell a story. When I approached a flower, I could see went, although not with physical eyes, entire stories unfolding. They were like living libraries, each one guarding ancient knowledge, secrets of the universe. A single sheet contained more information than all the books ever written by humanity. There were creatures there too, but they weren't like the animals we know. They were beings of light, some looking like birds made of pure energy, others like butterflies woven with threads of colored light. They moved with indescribable grace, and their presence conveyed profound messages without using words. The divine presence began to show me things that were beyond my human understanding. I saw how every choice we make creates waves of energy that affect the entire universe. I saw how every loving thought strengthens the light in the world, and how every act of kindness, no matter how small, has an eternal impact. I was shown that life as we know it is just a small part of a much larger existence. I saw how we were born and reborn, not out of punishment or obligation, but out of choice, out of love, out of a desire to grow and evolve. Each life is like a new page in an infinite book, each experience a learning opportunity. The most impressive thing was the music. If I can call what I heard that, they were not sounds as we know them, but vibrations that seemed to come from all directions. Every being, every plant, every particle of light contributed to this universal symphony. It was as if the entire universe was singing a song of infinite love. In that garden, time did not exist as we know it. A moment could contain eternities, and eternities could pass in the blink of an eye. Everything was happening simultaneously. Past, present, and future were one. You could see how every moment of existence is connected, how each event has a greater purpose in the grand design of life. The divine presence showed me that each of us carries a spark of this garden within us, that we can access this wisdom, this love, this connection at any time. We just need to silence the noise of the world and listen to the voice of the heart. We were all part of that garden, even when we forgot about it in our earthly lives. Just like the first time, the moment of choice has arrived. The divine presence again offered me the option of staying or returning. This time the decision was even more difficult, as now I knew exactly what I was leaving behind. The heavenly garden was more than a place of peace. It was a state of being that our human minds can barely comprehend. But again, it was my children who brought me back. The image of Dylan now in his university life, still in great need of guidance, even from a distance. My other children, each at their own stage of development, with their challenges and joys. Love for them was like a golden thread pulling me back to earthly life. The transition was smoother this time. It was as if I was being gently guided back into my body. As I returned, I could still feel the echoes of that heavenly music, as if part of it had been engraved in my soul. The divine presence gradually diminished, but before disappearing completely, it planted in my heart a deep certainty that we are never truly separated from that higher reality. I felt the cold water of the river again, but now in a different way. My body was being pulled by something. I later discovered it was the rope that the rescuers had managed to throw to me. Within seconds, strong hands pulled me to the riverbank. She was coughing, spitting water, shivering from the cold, but alive. The rafting guide, who had first aid training, immediately began emergency procedures. My friends were all there, with expressions of panic and relief mixed on their faces. Someone had called an ambulance, which arrived within minutes. We were in a popular rafting area with relatively easy access. At the hospital, the doctors were impressed with my recovery. According to them, she had been submerged long enough to have suffered serious brain damage, but there I was, conscious and lucid, with no apparent consequences. One of the doctors even said that I was very lucky, that it was a miracle, if only they knew. But again, I kept the experience to myself at that moment. How do I explain to a medical team that while they were fighting to bring my body back, I was in a celestial garden, learning secrets of the universe? How to make them understand that those minutes of clinical death had actually been an eternity of love and knowledge? This time, my hospital stay was shorter. Examinations showed no significant damage, just some scratches and bruises from impacts with rocks. Physically, I was fine, but internally, she was transformed. 2 near-death experiences in such a short space of time couldn't be a coincidence. There was a purpose to it all. Today, when I look back and reflect on my 2 near-death experiences, I realize how they completely changed the way I view life. I'm not the same person I was before, that scared, recently divorced woman trying to rebuild her life in a small Portland apartment. The change was not just in the way I see death, but mainly in the way I face life. The things that once seemed so important, the bills to pay, the unfinished apartment renovations, other people's opinions about my choices, now have a different weight. It's not that I've become irresponsible or alienated. I still pay my bills and take care of my obligations, but the perspective has changed. I know that there is something much bigger than our everyday problems. My relationship with my children has also transformed. I'm still a mother, with all the worries and care that entails, but now there's a different depth to our connection. When Dylan comes to visit me from college, or when I'm with my other children, I feel a love that goes beyond the physical, that transcends this plane of existence. It's as if you can see the divine light that exists within each of them. The hardest thing has been dealing with the knowledge I received. Revelations about our reality, about the awakening to come, sometimes weigh on my conscience. I didn't create any groups. I didn't write books. I didn't become a preacher or guru. That's not my role. But when someone shows genuine interest, when I feel the time is right, I share my experience, as I'm doing now. Some people ask me if I'm afraid of dying after these experiences. The answer is no. How can I be afraid of something that I knew so intimately and that was so full of love? But I'm also not in a hurry to leave. I learned that every moment here has its purpose, that every experience, even difficult ones, has its value in the big picture of existence. I continue my life as normally as possible. I work, I take care of the house, I maintain my friendships, but now I carry with me an inner peace that nothing can shake. I know that that heavenly garden, that divine music, that unconditional love, all of it continues to exist, even if we can't see it or touch it. It's always there, like a silent embrace from the universe. Sometimes, when I'm alone, I close my eyes and I can still feel echoes of that experience. Heavenly music has never completely left me. It is always there, in a little corner of my soul, as a constant reminder that we are much more than our physical bodies, much more than our daily worries. I don't know exactly what the future holds for us. The revelations I received about the awakening to come remain vivid in my memory, but I have learned to trust divine timing. My role is not to convince anyone, but simply to be present, live with love and share my experience when appropriate. And that's what I do, one day at a time, grateful for each moment on this extraordinary journey that is life.